and sick mother die after Rose, out of fear and confusion, failed to call for help immediately. This unresolved guilt and the burden of her perceived failure drive her compulsion to save others, an attempt to erase the stain of that initial trauma. Rose's fragile psychological foundation is the fertile ground for the malevolent entity that forms the central plot of the film. The core theme is the contagion of trauma, illustrating how one individual's catastrophic experience is violently and psychologically transferred to another as a deadly emotional burden, propagating a cycle of suffering and suicide. Rose's life is violently fractured when she meets Laura Weaver, a new patient brought into the ER in a state of extreme distress. Laura is on the verge of a complete breakdown, hysterically claiming she is being pursued by an invisible, sinister entity that manifests itself by possessing other people, who then display a terrifying, unnatural smile. Laura reveals she recently witnessed her professor's horrific, violent suicide, and now the entity is following her, intent on making her its next victim. Rose, relying on her professional training, initially treats Laura's claims as an acute psychotic break stemming from vicarious trauma. However, the atmosphere is charged with a deep, tangible dread. In a moment of absolute terror, Laura's face suddenly contorts into the signature grotesque, wide and malevolent grinner, chilling sight that defies human expression. Before Rose can react or summon help, Laura seizes a shard of a broken vase and brutally slits her own throat, dying instantly right in front of the traumatized Rose. Rose is the sole, horrified witness, and in this witnessing, the curse is transferred to her. The sudden, irreversible destruction of Rose's reality marks the end of the first act. Following Laura's suicide, Rose's reality rapidly disintegrates. The curse immediately begins its psychological assault, manifesting through terrifying visual and auditory hallucinations. The smiling faces become ubiquitous. Strangers on the street, her agitated patients, her fiancé Trevor, and even her sister Holly briefly appear to her with the malevolent, frozen grin. These smiles are not just jump scares. They are the external manifestation of Rose's inner turmoil and the feeling that the world is now fundamentally corrupted and hostile, viewed solely through the lens of overwhelming fear and trauma. This barrage of terrifying experiences severely isolates Rose, a crucial element of the entity, as modus operandi. Her fiancé, Trevor, dismisses her experiences as severe stress and a post-traumatic episode from Laura's death, refusing to believe in the supernatural element. Her sister, Harley, whose relationship with Rose is already strained by their mother's death, reacts with suspicion and hostility. Harley and her family swiftly begin to distance themselves, interpreting Rose's frantic pleas for help as evidence of a dangerous mental collapse. Desperate to break the cycle, Rose seeks help from her ex-boyfriend, Detective Joel, who, unlike her immediate family, agrees to investigate the bizarre chain of deaths. Together, they meticulously trace the victims backward, confirming the horrifying pattern across more than 20 individuals. Each victim's suicide was witnessed, and each subsequent victim died within a week. Their investigation leads them to Robert Talley, a previous victim of the curse who is now incarcerated. Talley is the only known person to have survived the curse's allotted time. Talley reveals the truth about the entity. It is known as the Rotting Bound, and it is not only transmissible but highly parasitic, feeding on the emotional energy derived from the victim's profound fear. Talley explains his survival. He murdered an innocent person who had not witnessed a cursed suicide, thus breaking the witnessing link and halting the curse's transfer from him. He warns Rose that the only way to beat it is to not let it get transferred. Crucially, He stresses that the entity exploits the victim's deepest, unresolved personal trauma. Rose rejects the horrific solution of murder, maintaining her moral compass. She determines her only course of action is to completely self-isolate before her death, ensuring that when the curse drives her to suicide, there will be absolutely no witness, thereby terminating the transfer chain. Rose retreats to her abandoned childhood home, the site of her original trauma, determined to face the demon alone. This physical isolation is intended to be her sanctuary, but it is also the place of her greatest psychological vulnerability. The entity manifests, first taking the form of her dead mother, leveraging Rose's core wound of guilt and perceived failure to save her. Rose confronts this vision, symbolically fighting back against her own past by setting the mother and the house ablaze, convinced that she has defeated the entity and freed herself from the curse. Rose leaves the burning house and calls out, believing she is safe. She is then confronted by Joel in her apartment, but this is not the real Joel. It is the entity wearing his face. The entity mockingly reveals that Rose's confrontation in her childhood home, her entire journey of facing the mother and setting the fire, was all a delusional fantasy occurring within her own mind while she was still in her apartment. She had never achieved true isolation. The entity sheds its human disguise and reveals its true, terrifying form, a large, monstrous creature with an impossibly vast, smiling mouth. It overpowers Rose with pure psychological horror, breaking her mind completely. The creature literally forces itself into her mouth, a sickening visual metaphor for the complete and utter consumption of the individual's psyche by the trauma. Simultaneously, the real Joel arrives at the dilapidated childhood home, only to find Rose standing with the characteristic ghastly grin, dousing herself in gasoline. Rose sets herself on fire, committing a violent suicide. Joel is the sole witness to this final, horrifying act. The final shot lingers on Joel's face as he realizes the magnitude of what he has just seen. The curse is successfully transferred to him, and the devastating cycle of trauma continues unabated. The film's narrative is meticulously crafted around Dr. Rose Cotter, a dedicated and meticulous psychiatrist working in a hectic emergency psychiatric unit. Rose's professional life is a direct consequence of her devastating past as a child. She witnessed her emotionally unstable